The decision was delivered without ceremony, without warning, and without a single member of the household being permitted to interrupt. King Charles sat at the head of a private Windsor table, placed his hand over a newly uncovered file, and declared that Camilla would lose every remaining privilege not automatically protected by marriage. In one devastating moment, the woman beside the throne was left with the title, but none of the power she believed came with it. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. Charles stared at the final page as though it had accused him. He read it twice while William watched his fingers hover beside the pen. The royal directive, a written order issued under the monarch's authority, removed Camilla's influence over household appointments, private archives, charity transfers, estate access, ceremonial planning, and succession talks. Her title would remain untouched, yet the channels that turned closeness into power would close at once. The king finally signed. No one spoke. William noticed that he never looked toward the empty chair reserved for Camilla, and the prince understood the cost beneath the ink. Charles was not celebrating. He looked like a husband cutting away part of his own life, because the monarch inside him believed the crown could no longer survive uncertainty. Camilla received the sealed copy in an adjoining room from the Lord Chamberlain, the senior official who helps manage the royal household. She opened it standing, but the first paragraph forced her into a chair. "Did he sign this himself?" she asked. When the answer came, the queen consort folded the pages, though her hands would not stop trembling. The recovered file made delay impossible. An unsigned continuity schedule, a plan for keeping duties and authority stable during change, appeared beside letters and amendments from the final years of Queen Elizabeth's reign. The papers showed that limits on a consort's authority had been discussed, recorded, and quietly ignored. One clause was harsher. No consort could redirect assets, archive access, ceremonial rank, or family appointments without written approval from both the sovereign and the direct heir. Charles realized several decisions made in his name had never reached both men. He ordered William to remain at Windsor, summoned Anne from Gatcombe, and instructed Camilla to attend a meeting that evening. The rights were gone. What remained was the question of trust. The order had taken away Camilla's power in less than 5 minutes, but the deeper wound would come when the people closest to her were forced to explain why none of them had tried to stop it. For decades, Charles had defended the woman he loved against public fury, family resistance, and the unforgiving shadow of the past. Yet the papers before him demanded something far more painful than loyalty. They demanded separation, the man from the monarch, the husband from the sovereign. Camilla had believed their survival proved that nothing could divide them. Now she was discovering that the crown did not need to end a marriage to make it feel unbearably lonely. Charles remained in his study after the others withdrew. He had spent years insisting that Camilla's place beside him was permanent, and every privilege she held had grown from the trust he placed in her. The directive, a formal written order carrying royal authority, therefore felt like a judgment against his own decisions. He had protected the crown, but he had also admitted that his confidence had failed. Camilla stood alone in her rooms with the sealed pages beside her. She had treated royal authority as proof that she was finally accepted, rather than merely tolerated. Years of service, public criticism, and private endurance had led to this position. Now the queen consort feared she had been left with a title people could display while every meaningful choice passed around her. Anger rose, then broke. Camilla lifted a framed photograph of herself and Charles from a side table and turned it face down. Seconds later, she turned it upright again. She could not reject the man without rejecting the life they had fought to build, yet she could no longer separate his love from the signature that had stripped her power. William entered the king's study without ceremony. He told his father that protecting the institution did not require humiliating Camilla. Charles answered that humiliation had never been his intention. The prince held his gaze and replied, "Intent will not be what she remembers." He understood that public order might survive while private trust collapsed. Anne arrived carrying a slim leather folder. She had sent its notes months earlier, questioning requests for family records, residence inventories, and charitable appointments. The Princess Royal, the special title traditionally given to the monarch's eldest daughter, had warned Charles that access was expanding without clear approval. He had delayed because he feared the dispute would look personal. A trusted aide then found a handwritten list on Camilla's desk. Catherine, Anne, Sophie, and William appeared beside duties once linked to her office. She had already seen the truth. Her influence was not disappearing into empty space. It was being handed to people she believed had never fully accepted her. William examined the recovered file again and noticed the same private secretary's initials beside several disputed instructions. That official had attended one crucial ceremony, where a verbal command was recorded in two conflicting ways. What looked like the collapse of one woman's authority had begun much earlier, during a private ceremony where a single spoken instruction was recorded in two completely different ways. The path to Camilla's removal did not begin with the new documents. It began 18 months earlier at Balmoral, after a memorial ceremony closed and the family withdrew behind locked doors. Charles was exhausted, William was preparing to leave, and Camilla requested 5 private minutes with the household secretary. What happened during those minutes was dismissed as routine, but one sentence from that conversation would later be remembered as the point of no return. Camilla waited until the memorial ended before approaching the household secretary. She said Charles wanted her office to supervise access to Queen Elizabeth's archive rooms and approve loans of jewelry, correspondence, and historic objects. The archive rooms, protected spaces holding personal records and possessions from the late monarch's life, mattered because controlling access meant controlling which memories entered public view. The secretary recorded the instruction as a direct command from the king. Yet Charles's diary contained no approval, and his briefing notes said every decision had been postponed until William and Anne could be consulted. A memorandum confirmed the delay. That conflict mattered because one written record could protect the crown, while the other could make Camilla appear authorized. Anne learned of the request days later when staff asked for inventories from rooms covered by her mother's archive arrangement. She confronted the official, who avoided her eyes and insisted the order had come from Charles. The princess closed the inventory book and said, "Then he can tell me himself." Her anger was not about possession. It was about someone using grief as a doorway to power. Charles reacted badly when his sister raised the issue. He accused Anne of treating Camilla like an intruder after years. She answered that belonging to the family was not the same as speaking in the sovereign's name. The king dismissed the warning, but the words stayed with him because he knew his sister rarely challenged him without evidence. The missing page changed everything. Attached to the restored instruction sheet was the secretary's documented concern that Camilla's request exceeded authority. Beneath it sat her recorded reply, "The distinction will not matter once the arrangement is in place." The line did not prove hatred or conspiracy, but it revealed urgency, calculation, and a willingness to act before resistance formed. Papers linked the Balmoral request to charity oversight, staff reporting lines, estate guest access, and ceremonial seating. Charles read each connection, then summoned the secretary and ordered Camilla to attend without advisors. He wanted no interpretation. He wanted her answer. The hidden page had revealed how the crisis began, but only a face-to-face confrontation could expose whether Camilla had misunderstood the king or knowingly acted beyond him. When Camilla entered the private Windsor drawing room, Charles was standing beside the fireplace with the recovered instruction sheet in his hand. No advisors sat between them. No official language could soften what was coming. William and Anne remained near the door, silent witnesses to a marriage colliding with the monarchy. The king waited until the door closed, raised the missing page, and asked the question that changed the room. "Why did you use my name?" Camilla did not answer at once. Charles had removed every secretary and legal advisor because he wanted no one translating her choices into softer language. William stood there as direct heir, the person next in line to the throne, while Anne remained because the disputed archives and estate arrangements protected their mother's legacy. Their presence mattered. This was no longer only a marital argument. It concerned who could speak with royal authority. Camilla finally said she believed the king had given broad consent during private conversations about modernizing the household. She reminded him of his exhaustion, illness, and crushing schedule, insisting that she had made decisions he would eventually have approved. Charles placed the sheet on the table. "Supporting me did not give you the right to become my voice," he said. The silence cut deeper than shouting. Camilla answered that she had protected him for years, while others protected only the institution. She asked whether he truly believed she had betrayed him. Charles struggled before replying. "I believe you stopped asking where your authority ended." Her anger collapsed into grief because he was no longer judging one action. He was condemning what she had allowed herself to become. William stepped forward with another letter. The correspondence, a written exchange preserved as evidence, showed Camilla's office directing staff to describe disputed changes as the settled wish of their majesties. The prince asked why Charles's approval had been presented as joint certainty when no signed agreement existed. She looked at him, then admitted the truth. Camilla had pushed the arrangements forward because she feared William would reverse them once he became king. She was not merely helping Charles, she was trying to secure influence before power shifted away from her. Anne heard the admission without triumph, and Charles looked wounded rather than surprised. The king summoned the Lord Chamberlain and ordered the removal directive circulated before midnight. The senior household official would send it to every affected office, making the decision immediate and irreversible. Camilla understood there would be no private renegotiation after tempers cooled. Their confrontation destroyed the last illusion that this was merely a misunderstanding, and by midnight, the king's private heartbreak would be transformed into an institutional purge. Royal power rarely disappears with a dramatic announcement. It vanishes through cancelled access cards, revised signatures, empty diary pages, and doors that no longer open. Before midnight, the directive moved through Windsor, Buckingham Palace, Clarence House, and the private estates. Each office received the same instruction. Camilla's approval was no longer sufficient. Yet behind the machinery stood one exhausted man, watching the consequences of his signature spread faster than he could emotionally absorb them. Charles remained beside the desk while a private secretary read the cancelled privileges aloud. As sovereign, the reigning monarch with final authority over the royal household, he controlled ceremonial assignments, access, appointments, and discretionary family arrangements. William's approval also mattered, because the recovered papers required both the king and direct heir to agree on succession, archives, and long-term estate governance. The list kept growing. Camilla's staff could still manage her clothing, correspondence, personal engagements, and approved patronages, meaning charities formally supported by a royal figure. Yet her office could no longer direct shared resources or present her wishes as commands from the crown. That distinction mattered because influence without written limits had created the crisis, and every department now needed to know exactly where her authority ended. Charles raised his hand after the fifth removal. He asked the secretary to stop, crossed toward the window, and pressed his thumb against the cold glass. "It sounds harsher aloud," the king whispered. On paper, the directive had appeared controlled. Spoken line by line, it sounded like the dismantling of a life he had helped build. Anne refused to turn accountability into vengeance. She accepted temporary protection of the archives, but rejected control over Camilla's remaining charities. The princess warned William that punishment could become cruelty if the family allowed anger to guide every transfer. He understood her restraint. Even the queen consort's strongest critic knew public humiliation would weaken the crown rather than protect it. William then faced the second signature, the continuity clause, a rule keeping an order active through a future change of reign, required his name beside Charles's. The prince hesitated because signing would make the restrictions permanent. He agreed only after adding protections for Camilla's residence, security, dignity, and direct access to her husband. Camilla watched an official arrive at Clarence House and count archive keys beside ceremonial registers. She said nothing as each item was removed. For her, the judgment had finally become real. The crown had carefully preserved Camilla's dignity on paper, but dignity offered little comfort when strangers began removing the symbols of trust from the rooms she still called home. By morning, nothing about Camilla's rooms appeared dramatically different. The paintings remained, the flowers had been replaced, and her morning papers were still arranged beside the tea. But 3 locked boxes stood near the door, waiting to carry away the objects she was no longer authorized to hold. For the first time since becoming queen consort, She was surrounded by every symbol of her position, while feeling that none of them truly belonged to her. Camilla watched officials remove archive keys, shared seals, estate schedules, distribution lists, and ceremonial briefing books. The shared seals, official marks used to approve or identify authorized royal business, mattered because possession of them signaled trust. Staff now had to send decisions through Charles, William, Anne, or the Lord Chamberlain, depending on the subject. Her office still existed, but its reach had been cut away. The Queen would continue beside the King at approved public duties. She retained her title, residence, security, personal staff, and chosen charities. That contrast made the punishment harder. Camilla still had to present unity before the country, while privately accepting that the institution no longer trusted her judgment. An official reached for the final archive key. Camilla closed her fingers around it and asked for 1 minute alone. When the room emptied, she traced its worn edge with her thumb, placed it inside the box herself, and lowered the lid with deliberate care. The gesture carried no anger. It felt like surrender. Sophie arrived without warning and found her beside the packed cases. She did not defend what had happened, but the trusted confidant refused to leave her alone. Camilla admitted that losing authority hurt less than knowing Charles now questioned her intentions. Sophie answered quietly that trust could return only after truth stopped being managed. Unease spread among the staff. Several long-serving aides requested transfers, while others removed correspondence that showed how widely Camilla's instructions had traveled. A junior secretary refused. She approached William with an encrypted drive, a protected device requiring special access to read, containing calendars, draft orders, and internal voice notes. The aide told the prince through a documented account that senior officials had ordered staff to clean the record before the directive arrived. She preserved everything because another altered archive could damage the monarchy beyond repair. William opened the file list, but stopped when one title appeared. An unsent message from Camilla to Charles. He did not listen. William carried the device directly to his father, knowing her voice might confirm betrayal or expose the fear beneath it. The official records had shown how Camilla reached for power, but her own unheard voice was about to reveal what she had been too frightened to say directly to the man she loved. Charles listened to the recording alone at first. Camilla's voice was low, uneven, and stripped of the certainty she displayed before officials. She spoke not as a consort issuing instructions, but as a woman terrified of disappearing when the rain changed. Halfway through, the king stopped the message and asked William to enter. What followed was not a council meeting or legal review. It was a private conversation between a father and son about love, fear, and the damage created when neither is honestly named. Charles restarted the unsent message from the beginning. Camilla had recorded it after the Balmoral dispute, then hidden it rather than sending it. Her words revealed that she had been building protections around her position because she expected William to remove her influence after his father's death. The recording mattered because it exposed motive in her own voice, not through a secretary's summary or a disputed document. The Queen admitted that public acceptance had never cured her fear of being temporary. Every ceremony, patronage, and household responsibility had become proof that she belonged. A patronage, a public cause supported by a royal figure, carried meaning beyond appearances. Losing one duty felt to her like returning to the years when every room seemed to question whether she deserved to enter. Charles lowered his head. He told William that he had defended Camilla before the country, but rarely gave her private certainty about the future. The king understood that his silence had allowed fear to harden into entitlement, yet he refused to excuse what followed. Love could explain her panic, he said, but it could not authorize anyone to speak with sovereign power. William answered without advisors or prepared language. He admitted that he distrusted Camilla's attempts to shape family arrangements and would have limited some responsibilities in a future reign. The prince insisted, however, that he had never planned to erase her from Charles's life or deny her security as his father's widow. The signed directive remained in Charles's hand. He replayed the final seconds, then asked whether mercy required reversal. William said compassion, after judgment, was not weakness. But undoing the order would teach the household that emotion could defeat constitutional limits, the written boundaries controlling royal authority. Charles kept every restriction in place. Instead, he wrote Camilla a private guarantee of lifelong residence, security, income arrangements, and a respected family position. She accepted it without asking for power back, then agreed to accompany him to Windsor Chapel before the announcement. The private crisis had reached a human settlement, but beyond Windsor's walls, the world was preparing to turn their pain into headlines, arguments, and judgment. At sunrise, the gates of Buckingham Palace became the center of a national argument. Cameras crowded the pavement, broadcasters abandoned their schedules, and newspapers rushed out editions dominated by one image: Charles and Camilla walking side by side after he had removed every remaining instrument of her authority. Some saw punishment, others saw protection. But beneath the debate was a stranger truth. The monarchy had chosen to display marital unity while publicly admitting that trust inside the institution had broken. The palace released a short statement before breakfast. It confirmed that household and continuity arrangements had been revised after historic governance papers were recovered. Continuity arrangements, rules designed to keep royal duties and authority stable during change, now placed every disputed power with Charles, William, and approved officers. Camilla remained queen consort, but her title no longer carried authority over shared royal decisions. William continued with a scheduled engagement and refused to discuss the crisis. Anne attended an investiture, a ceremony where people receive honors for service, while Sophie appeared at a charity reception. Their calm routines mattered because they showed that the family considered the judgment final. No one behaved as though another negotiation was coming. A special newspaper edition struck first. Its front page declared, "Queen in title, but not in power." Beneath the words, Camilla left Windsor Chapel, while Charles reached toward her hand without fully taking it. The image captured loyalty and distance together. She remained beside him, yet the space between their fingers seemed to reveal everything the statement had avoided. A broadcaster sharpened the meaning during a live national program. Reading from a prepared account, the presenter called it, "The day the king chose the crown over the authority of his own wife, but not over the wife herself." Within minutes, the line spread across every debate, dividing sympathy between the monarch's duty and the queen's humiliation. The crowd outside Buckingham Palace reflected the same split. One woman held flowers for Camilla. Another raised a placard reading, "No one speaks for the crown without consent." Neither shouted. Their silence made the clash stronger because both believed they were defending fairness. Camilla's communications team prepared a statement challenging the scale of the restrictions. She refused to release it. Another public battle, she said in a recorded staff conversation, would prove she had learned nothing. Charles summoned William, Anne, Catherine, Sophie, and Camilla to Windsor that evening. He would now explain how private fear had become institutional power. The public had already written its verdict in headlines, but the final meaning of the crisis would be decided inside Windsor, where Charles faced the family without documents between them. There was no celebration inside Windsor that night. No one treated Camilla's removal as a victory, because every person in the room understood what had been lost along with her authority. Charles had protected the crown, but he had exposed the limits of trust within his marriage. Camilla had kept her title and her husband, but she could no longer confuse love with permission. The monarchy survived the crisis by accepting a truth it had resisted for too long. Closeness to power is not ownership of it. Charles faced William, Anne, Catherine, Sophie, and Camilla without advisors beside him. He declared that no spouse, child, sibling, favorite, or trusted official could issue institutional commands through private access again. A delegation of authority, written permission allowing someone to exercise specific royal powers, would now need clear limits, an end date, and the knowledge of both the sovereign and direct heir. The rule mattered because affection had blurred responsibility, while secrecy had allowed fear to resemble lawful command. William and the king then approved a permanent division of duties. Anne would protect the family archives, Catherine would guide long-term charitable coordination, and Sophie would support selected national organizations. Professional officers would supervise estates and household appointments. This mattered because no single relative could quietly gather influence again, and every major decision would leave a record that future generations could examine. Charles turned toward Camilla. He called removing her authority the most painful decision of his reign. The monarch did not apologize for signing the order, but he apologized for letting uncertainty about her future deepen, until she believed security had to be seized rather than promised. She listened without defending herself. Camilla acknowledged that fear of William's future reign had governed her choices. The Queen admitted she crossed a boundary and said remaining beside Charles must now mean accepting the crown's limits as well as its privileges. She asked for no restoration. William answered with quiet firmness. He promised that her home, safety, and place in his father's life would remain protected, but trust would return through conduct, not ceremony. Camilla accepted that judgment without argument. Charles offered his arm as they reached the doorway. She paused, studied him, then took it, not as a consort exercising power, but as a wife choosing to remain after power had been removed. And so the crisis ended not with exile or revenge, but with a king defending the crown, a queen accepting its limits, and a family finally understanding that loyalty without accountability can become the most dangerous privilege of all. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.